Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Columbus Career Analyst. I'm Jake Holfinger, and today I will be going over some data analysis that I did about the relationship between possession and non-penalty expected goal difference per 90, which basically is an indicator of team performance, is like one of the best indicators of team performances. So, first I'll start off with what is npxGD per 90. And so here we'll look at what is XG. We'll start off with that. So XG is the chance or the probability that a shot will go in. So every time a player will shoot in a soccer game, models predict the probability that the shot will become a goal. And that is the XG for one shot, the expected goals for one shot. And then a team's expected goals is the sum of all of the expected goals for each shot in a game. So like each shot probability of going in will be added up over the whole game, and that's a team's expected goals for the game. And so why would you use npxG or non-penalty expected goals instead of xG? So penalties have like a 0.7 xG, which is very high, and if you get a penalty by putting it across and the defender handballs it, you didn't deserve 0.7 xG from that. You didn't really create enough to deserve that. So if you take out penalties, the expected goal for penalties, then you will get a more accurate representation of a team's attacking output or defensive output if you are looking at non-penalty xG against. And so I'm using non-penalty xG difference. So the non-penalty xG for your team minus non-penalty xG against to factor in both attack and defense. And then per 90 is per 90 minutes, and 90 minutes is a game, so per game. So that way if teams have played a different amount of games, you get the average. So that way it's comparable. So yeah. If you have any questions, put those in the chat, feel free. I'll read them off. They'll show up on the left side of your screen. So now we'll get into the actual analysis that I did. So what I did is I took every team's average possession and I calculated every team's non-penalty XG difference per 90. I took the XG from non-penalty XG from a website, RBRef, which is a site that has all of the stats for the MLS. I recommend looking at that if you're interested in stats. So I downloaded the XG for the non-penalty XG for every team and their average possession, and then I computed non-penalty XG difference per 90 and graphed that against possession. And what you'll see on the top left of your screen of the page right here is a scatter plot with a line with kind of like a shaded blue area and a line going through that. And the line here is the line of best fit for the graph or the scatter plot. And basically what a line of best fit does is it creates a approximation or a prediction of what will happen. So basically if you have 40% possession, then you go to that line, find where that intersects with the line, and then go to the left and find where that intersects non-penalty XG per 90, and that will get your expected value for that. So that's your line of best fit there. And you can also do curves or whatever, but I thought for this one, lines would be best. But if you look at the graph, really, there isn't a trend that much. There isn't really like a straight line or like a trend that you see that shows this line. So if you look at, there's a table here with some of the values that I took out. You have the p-value on the bottom right, which is the chance that the relationship is due to random chance. So if there were no relationship, the chance that this graph would happen. And if the p-value is below 0.05 or below 5%, then you can assume that there is a relationship between the two variables. So yeah, and then the bottom left in the table is the slope. It's just the slope is for 1 unit increase in the x position. So 1 unit increase in possession, how much does the line rise, or what's the increase in non-penalty expected goal difference per 90? And the last one that I feel that is important is the R squared value. And basically what that is it's an indicator of how well the line fits the data. It's a range from 0 to 1. Same with p-value. P-value is a range from 0 to 1. 1 being that it's not that that you would want to reject, or I guess I shouldn't get into that. So if it's low, then you can assume that there is that it's improbable and that there is a connection between the two. But if it's high, then there isn't. And same with R squared. If it's a high value, then the data does. If it's a low value, the data doesn't fit. The line doesn't fit the data, but if it's a high value, it does. And in this case, our R squared value is 0.032, so very low, which means that the line does not fit the data. Our p-value is 0.343, so I mean it's pretty high. It's way higher than 0.05. So you would have to assume, and you can see in the interpretation here that I have, that we cannot conclude that there's a relationship between possession and non-penalty xG per 90. And also the slope, I'll just mention this. We can look at it later when it actually is true, when we actually do want to look at that, because that when there's an increase in 1% of possession, non-penalty xG per 90 should increase by 0.148 or 0.0148. And that's what the slope is telling us. But we have to disregard that because the p-value is high and the R squared value is low. But something that happens with the line of best fit is that there's outliers. It can skew the line heavily and make it so the R squared value is low and the p-value is higher. And if you look at the top left of the graph, you have a dot there that's kind of out in the middle of nowhere, low possession but high non-penalty xG per 90, and that's Minnesota United. So something that I did, and we'll look at the next slide, is that that dot really skews our line of best fit, our analysis. So what I did was I took it out to get a better look at the rest of the MLS because Minnesota is such an outlier. So now we're looking at the same thing but without Minnesota. So you can see the line is a little bit more sloped. And yeah, so if you look at the R squared value, that is 0.1, or I can't really read that. But anyways, it's higher now. So that means that the line is a better fit for the data. And then if we look at the p-value is also is actually lower. It's about 0.05. So that means that it's not below 0.05, so we can't technically assume that there's a relationship between possession and non-penalty xG per 90, but non-penalty xG difference per 90. But really, it's so close that we can say that there may be a relationship, and there may be and since the line is positively sloped, that we can assume that possession may have a positive effect on non-penalty xG difference per 90, or possession may have a positive effect on team performance. So, yeah, and then if we look at the possession, since there may be a positive effect, we can also say that if we look at the slope this time, it's 0.0354. So, an increase in 1% of possession should correlate to an increase of 0.0354 in non-penalty xG per 90. Next xG difference per 90. And so basically what that means is if you have a team that has 60% possession, they should have, per game, they should have 0.354 non-penalty xG higher than a team with 50%. And if you had a team with 40% versus 60%, which is on the opposite ends of the spectrum, really, like there's no one worth really that, but then you would expect that there would be a 0.7, pretty much a 0.7 difference, which is a lot considering that's almost a goal difference. And right now it would be a third of a goal difference for a team that has a difference of 10%, but there are teams with more than that. So you can there may be a positive effect, but the line doesn't really fit since the R-squared value is low. The line doesn't really fit the data, so you have to take that with a grain of salt. But basically, we can assume that there might be a positive relationship. There probably is, but we can't technically assume that because the p-value is above 0.05. So yeah, I thought this was interesting. I would have assumed beforehand that the non-penalty xG per 90 would increase with possession. I thought it would be a big difference. But really, we can't really assume that the data isn't fit well enough to a straight line. It's to the variation of like the non-penalty xG per 90 in comparison with the possession is too all over the place. It's too like circular. It's too square. There's not like a clear trend here. So, I mean, there might be, but we can't really tell. But something that I did notice that the analysis didn't, that the analysis doesn't cover is that every team that has over like a 54% chance, 54% possession is in this very high, has like above 0 non-penalty xG difference per 90. So that means that they are a good team. They're on average like have a better attacking output than they give up defensively. So if you're able to get like over 54%, that means you are a good team, which is interesting. And the data analysis doesn't really cover that. And we have a comment here. So basically, if the team has a high percentage possession, then the XG should be higher. I mean, yes, we can assume that may happen. The p-value is about 5, so we can assume that that might happen. We can't definitely assume that that's true because the p-value's around 5, a little bit higher than 5, and the R-squared value is still pretty low. But yeah, I mean, that probably is true. So yeah. So anyway, yeah. So I think that something that's interesting, but it's a small sample size. There's only a few teams that have above 54% possession, and so you have to take that with a grain of salt. But that also might be true that if you can have more than 54% possession or around that range, if you can have more than 55 or whatever, then you should be better team. Then you're a better team because you're able to keep that ball, and you are a better team than other players. Usually, teams with more possession are better, at least in the Premier League, but the MLS is different since every team's more even. But yeah, so that's interesting there that teams with a lot of possession are usually better, but we don't know that. We can't technically assume that yet. So yeah, any questions? I think I've covered everything that I wanted to there. If not, you can leave it in the comments. I'll respond to it after I'm done going live. I'll give you guys another minute or so there. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate it. So I'm looking at maybe doing another one of these types of things. I think I'll do I'm going to do the same thing, but possession and XG difference for the Cruise games. So instead of between teams, I'm going to look at when the Crew have higher possession, do we do better as a team? So I'll look at that, maybe get that up tomorrow, have an Instagram post, and do a video too about this, do kind of the same thing. So yeah, thank you guys so much, and I'll see you guys later.